Welcome to Unexpected Points. I am your host, Kevin Cole. I am joined today by NFL Nation Buffalo Bills reporter Marcel Louis-Jacques. Did I get that right there?
Yeah, you nailed it, man. I was holding my breath for a second. I was like, "Oh man, we didn't go over pronunciation. What's this going to be
All
like?"
right. It's
But
not like I've
sound
heard it
cultured.
like Jacques on the end. Do you ever throw that on the end there to get a little freaky or not? No.
Every now and then when I go to a new market, because I've moved like 5 times in my career, I've always thought, like, man, is this the one? Like, am I going to pull off my French, my Haitian accent? Am I going to try something new here? And I just wuss out every time. So maybe next move, if there is the next move, then I'm going heavy on the French.
Okay, well, I think it works well. I mean, it sets you out there. I do kind of suspect whether or not it's actually Marcel Jones, and then you just changed it up as part of this career path where it was probably a detriment earlier in life, but now it's coming into play now as you're setting your brand out there in the internet, which we all have to do.
Exactly. That would be hilarious, man. Just like, no. Look at my parents, like, nah, this isn't gonna work. Not the
Yeah.
family name. I need to add a little. I need to sprinkle some salt and pepper on there. A little allspice on
Yeah.
this last name.
Yeah, you have to do that sometimes. Well, I appreciate you joining me. I know this is a bit of a numbers based podcast, but I want to have you on there. I've been following you. I like your takes. You're obviously very adept at using the numbers in your analysis, but also you got your ear to the streets there in Buffalo. You know what's going on with the team. And it's one of the more interesting franchises, in my opinion, not only for the fact that in contention, not only for the fact that Josh Allen has taken this step, but I'm interested in the coaching situation where I think potential coach of the year-ish McDermott, maybe it's faded a little bit there. And then also front office, I think what Brandon Beane has done there. So I want to talk about all those different elements. Now, like I said, I've been following you since we met briefly at the Combine with mutual friend Charles McDonald, now Twitter famous Charles McDonald. I didn't think he could top the 5-cheese Andy Reid mac and cheese recipe, but he's taking it to the next level here. So I hope he's still returning your phone calls.
Oh, of course, man. I don't think Charles ever be too big time to forget about the homies, man. But no, I'm proud of Charles. Proud of him for sticking out that situation, man. It was brutal, and I'm just glad that he's getting a shine. He got that off his chest, and he let the world know what he's been dealing with behind the scenes. But that's a talented man right there, bro.
Yeah,
That's
no,
my guy.
I love. I love him. I love his work. Yeah, I think I had a poor read on the situation because when I first saw it, I was like, I don't know about that. But then as it started to come in, I was like, oh, I realized there's a lot of stuff in the background here. So it wasn't like it was really lashing out. It was like everyone else. It was like when it's kind of like lighting that little embers on the fire, and then everyone else is like, boom, let's get it. Let's get in on this. So yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it was one of those like people just didn't know, and like I feel like I don't think he went into this saying, I want to just drop the nuke, but you can only be pushed so far is what I can add to it. You can only be pushed so far, and I think he got pushed a little too far.
Yeah, well, hopefully your situation in Buffalo is a little bit is a little bit better than that. But so let's talk. So you've been there. We were talking a little bit earlier. You've been there a little bit over a year. I want to first start by kind of taking a lay of the land for the Bills. So everyone knows Josh Allen. He's made this leap. He's playing on a statistical basis and close to on a grading basis for us in that top 5, 6, 7-ish sort of quarterback. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think from following you in the offseason, us numbers guys, certain draft community guys would have suspected that anything could have had, like the Josh Allen may be the strangest thing that happened in 2020 for some of us, if you can believe that, for everything that's happened in 2020 because of the opinions going in. I think you were kind of cautiously optimistic going into the season, maybe I would say it. So was there something that you were seeing that was maybe being missed by being there? Because obviously, if you're a little bit negative on Josh Allen, we know about the Bills Mafia on Twitter, so we know how they feel. I felt you to be kind of like a rational voice in all of that. So, was there something that we were missing that you were seeing on a day-to-day basis there last season?
Yeah, when this comes out, I feel like there's going to be a few replies about me working with the enemy here, because I don't think PFF is very much liked in Buffalo.
Well, I'm glad you don't have the Buffalo versus PFF shirt on while we're talking here, so that's good.
Absolutely not. I'm repping my man Bodie James here, but Versace tapes here. But no, I think the difference is I saw him play, and
Yeah.
that's nothing against anybody that works for PFF or anybody who looks at the numbers and determined that he was going to be an average to below average quarterback. it just, he passed the eye test. And when you watch his games, he can bang his head against the wall for 3 quarters. In 2019, he could bang his head against the wall for 3 quarters, and then in the fourth quarter, it all made sense. It all made sense. He started hitting windows. He started making those reads quickly. He would nail his deep passes, and he would do whatever it took to go win the ball game. That's why he's got more game-winning drives and more fourth quarter comebacks than anybody in the league, except for, I believe it's Deshaun Watson and or Russell Wilson. That's elite company when it comes to coming in the clutch. And so you had to think, okay, I've seen these fourth quarters enough times. I've seen that enough to think and believe he can someday put that together over the course of a full game. And that was the caveat, was if he plays like fourth quarter Josh over a full game, then he's going to be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And that's what we've seen him do time and time again in 2020, is he's been fourth quarter Josh. You know, when we see him against the Seahawks, you saw him against the Rams, save a couple of kind of classic head scratching plays
Right.
against Miami there in week 2. I mean, he has it. He has it. And this has been undoubtedly the best football I think he's ever played at any stage of his career. But that was really what was driving my opinion, was I had seen him at his best and knew that, okay, beyond the Twitter videos, beyond the clips and the reels and vines, whatever the kids are using nowadays, that this was a burgeoning good quarterback. It's just, he took a lot of flack from the perceived boneheaded plays that kind of plagued him over the first 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of a first half, second half phenomenon with Allen last year. If you split up what he did at the end of the year, he looked a lot better statistically, but he's kind of taken it to the next level this year. I mean, if we look at, the biggest thing probably was accuracy that we're going, that he had never, I don't think he'd ever thrown for 60% completion percentage. As rough of a measure as that is, right? That's not like a perfect measure of anything. Even in college, I don't have his rivals information for high school for what he was doing there, but now he's up to close to 70%. He was really good last year at not throwing interceptions. He was pretty good. He didn't turn the ball over a lot, at least throwing the ball, and they were throwing a decent amount. So he had that going for him. But this year, his interceptions, it's about the same, but it's just those high end type of plays that he's doing as often. But what I saw in certain games, now there have been some games, like I think people point to the Tennessee game maybe being the beginning of showing a little bit of issues. Even last week, when you get a victory against a tough Chargers team, but that felt like a 2019 type of game, a little bit more with the Bills. So what's the formula for them going forward? Because that defense was rough, and Allen was really putting the team on his back, not only because he's rushing the ball, he's throwing the ball. The defense wasn't playing well. Last game, the defense helped him out a bit, and he made some mistakes, and he wasn't at that top level, but they were still able to win the game with the defense. Is that going to be the formula going forward? What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't perfect, I guess, against the Chargers. Obviously, fumbled that snap, threw that just really bad decision, interception as well in the fourth quarter. But that's one of those. It's one of those games where you can't let the numbers, I guess, be the story, because the Bills entered that game, hell bent on running the football, to the point where, they ran for 174 yards. It's their second highest total of the season. And some want to say, well, they established the run game is back. Yeah, but they forced the issue. Like they forced the issue. I think the smart game plan would have been to put the ball in Josh Allen's hands and let him throw. But they never really let him get into a rhythm against the Chargers. I think he probably would have had a bigger day if they had stuck to that pass happy game plan. But either way, what the Bills have done over the past 2 seasons, and when he entered the league, Josh Allen was seen as this, big armed, 80-yard bomb, Hail Mary type quarterback. And that's just not efficient. That's not efficient football. That's like in basketball, that's like saying we're going to pull up from half court every possession. So what the Bills did quietly was they assembled some pass catchers who excel at separating in the intermediate part of the field. Guy like Cole Beasley, guy like Stephon Diggs this year, a guy like John Brown, who's been kind of miscast as a vertical threat just because I think it worked for him early on in Arizona. And people said, all right, well, if it works, we're not gonna fix it. But he runs every route in the tree, and he runs them well. So they prioritized separation, and they made Josh Allen one of the better intermediate passers in the NFL. And they said, okay, we're not going to necessarily stretch the field all the time. We want you to hit these crossing routes, these out routes, these slants. We want you to stay in this pocket. And that's really where Josh Allen thrives. And then when defenses creep up, that's when he can take the top off to guys like Diggs, to guys like Gabriel Davis and guy like Brown. So that's really where the Bills operate. I think that's where they're at their best is when they get the ball into the hands of these shifty, quick guys and let them pick up yards after the catch.
Yeah, I mean, there was this. Obviously, Allen has struggled a lot as far as throwing deep the last couple of seasons. He was really hot to start the season. I think he's still been pretty good recently. There was a little bit of a cool off. I mean, certain things like the 55-yard DPI to Diggs, that doesn't really get counted in some statistics versus some other statistics. So I think that element is definitely there. What I thought was interesting. Now, you said they were really hell bent on running the ball, but what I've seen from McDermott. Offensively, and I actually I don't know if it's McDermott. You know, obviously this Leslie Frazier's former head coach. You know, very well reputed guy on that side of the ball. You know, like against Kansas City, I remember they said, you know, they kind of admitted they were just going to let them run the ball and see what happens. Against last week, they ran the ball a lot, but against the Seahawks were a little bit surprised by the fact that they didn't really try to run the ball at all in that game. So how much is it hell-bent on running the ball? How much are they willing to just adjust to their opponent, maybe a little bit more than some others who have a quote-unquote identity for what they're trying to do? Or do you see this running game sticking going forward?
I think they want to be the type of offense that just adapts to their matchup. That's what we keep hearing from them. And that's what we've shown against the Patriots. Were a weaker run defense. They were able to establish the run there. The Seahawks are historically bad passing defense.
Yeah.
So they said, all right, well, Josh, go sling it. The Chargers are kind of middle of the road in both categories. I think they're slightly better passing defense than run defense, but not by much, and not enough so that it made sense for them to attack on the ground, in my opinion. But it sounded like going into the bye week, Bills admitted that they're going to do a deep dive on getting this run game jump started. And it just felt like, okay, week 12 felt like, all right, we want to show that we've got this figured out. We are going to get this ground game going no matter what. And I didn't really feel like that was necessary, but they won the game. So it's difficult to really critique them there. But make no mistake, like Zach Moss and Devin Singletary, they're good runners right now. This is not a run first team anymore. This is not the 2019 or 2018 Bills anymore. Their strength lies in Josh Allen's right arm. And when they have that full complement of receivers, it's a very, very difficult offense to stop, especially if you are committed to playing man coverage. These are receivers that will eat you alive. Specifically, Stephon Diggs will eat you alive in man-to-man situations. And so even as the weather turns down here, I mean, it's snowing today. Even as the weather turns in Buffalo, I would expect them to stick to that script, because that gives them the best chance to win.
Yeah, and then if you have man coverage, then you have Josh Allen who can scramble out on that too, unless you have a spy. So yeah, they have a lot of. That's the big formula there. Now, okay, so we mentioned before that. So Bean has been there now. I think he took over in 2017, but it was post draft. So he didn't draft some of the guys who have big guys on there. Like, I don't know, he didn't draft Tre'Davious White, I don't think, or some of the other pieces like Dawkins, the tackle. I don't think he drafted him either. But he brought in. He kind of built up the offensive line. They brought in Beasley and John Brown, and now they've added Stephon Diggs, who is having this out of the world type of season. Who you thought everyone knew he was good, but I don't know if there's anyone other. Well, I mean, Stephon Diggs knew this, right? But I don't know how many other. He knows it a lot. If there's anybody else who really saw him take it to the next level, so how much can you? I mean, it's difficult to like disaggregate all these different parts and think about how this guy matters versus this guy versus this guy. But how much does Diggs specifically matter as opposed to being part of this trio, or even Gabriel Davis is starting to look a little interesting there. Dawson Knox can do can do a little things. Like, how much of it is it really just having this panoply of options versus Diggs taking him to the next level this year?
Don't get me wrong. The depth at receiver is important, and the versatility of each guy is very important. But if John Brown misses time, which he obviously is currently, this passing game can still operate. If Stephon Diggs misses time, I think that this passing game falters, like tables off a lot. This gives them, he's a true alpha. And I've been a big believer in John Brown since last year. I think, I think he can operate as a team's leading receiver, but that's just not really his game. He can separate well. He's good after the catch, don't get me wrong, but it's that contested catch area that's not really his forte. And even though Stephon Diggs is not much bigger than John Brown, those contested catches is something that Diggs excels at. And he's excellent, like I said, after the catch. He separates. He's a guy you can funnel 10, 11, 12 targets to in a pinch, and he can come up with 80-ish% of them. So he is a critical component of this passing game. And, a lot of people said that Buffalo overpaid for him. And I was never on board with that. And I think a lot of that reaction was fueled by the fact that the Texans gave away DeAndre Hopkins for a used bag of socks. But what you paid for Stephon Diggs, that is the price of a number one receiver. They saw him as a number one receiver. That is what you pay for him. And I don't think anybody in town or anybody in that organization is regretting that move now. But no, Diggs, he's probably the most irreplaceable receiver in this offense, followed by Cole Beasley.
Yeah, I mean that was a strange series of events because you have the trade and then Minnesota kind of, I mean, I won't say lucks into Justin Jefferson, but remember Jalen Reagor went immediately before Justin Jefferson. So they were at the mercy of whoever the Eagles were going to take there. And he's kind of looking like a stud there too. Yeah, I think it's interesting, this Diggs type of receiver versus someone like DeAndre Hopkins, because Hopkins has the stat line, right? He was getting so many targets. He's getting so many receptions, not necessarily stretching the field or being the guy who adds that extra element to the game. So where do you think Diggs is amongst these top guys? And then the Bills are throwing the ball a lot, so he's up there with them. I mean, do you consider him to be really this type of prototype elite guy near the top, or is it a situation where he adds other elements to the game and kind of affects the defense in a way that maybe doesn't show up in the stat line the same way?
Yeah, it depends really on how many receivers you're trying to put in your elite tier. Is he Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins, or Michael Thomas when Taysom Hill's not the quarterback? Maybe not. But is he a top 8 guy? I think that. I think the lowest I would even reasonably listen to for Stephon Diggs is number 8 in the league. I think he's top 10 without a doubt. And, was a little not overshadowed, but underutilized given the presence of Adam Thielen, and rightfully so. Diggs is great, but Adam Thielen is damn good as well. You can't just ignore having him on the other side of the field. But he is just, watching him in training camp, just running against air, it was different. I haven't seen a superb amount of receivers in my NFL journalism career, but he was far and away the best route runner just because it looked effortless. And the way he catches the ball, it's like he wasn't even trying. It just kind of found his hands and locked in. And you just knew just some of the things that, the way that Josh Allen was placing the ball to him. Once again, even against air, you knew that this relationship was going to work out better than expected. So I think the stats, good for him. Somehow hasn't made a Pro Bowl. I'd imagine that probably changes this year, but the stats are finally catching up to the talent. He does have back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, and what really is impressive, I think, is the way that he's done them. He did it I believe it was in 2018 via long field stretching receptions. And then he did it in 2019 based on being that kind of intermediate guy that he is right now. I might have the years reversed, but you know what I'm trying to say. He did it in 2 different ways. So I think that proves a little bit of his versatility.
Yeah, it's one of those weird situations where sometimes even draft status can stick with you a little bit too long. He was a 5th round pick coming out, which was surprising. He had some injury history when he was at Maryland, but yet he was pretty good. Immediately playing his first season with midway through with the Vikings, and then they had that type of offense which held him back a little bit. So yeah, I could see how some of that stuff still affects into the narrative on how good a particular receiver may be if they don't have that first round pedigree. Some people had pointed to John Brown because when he had I guess it was calf issue earlier when he was missing time that there was some difficulty there. I don't know if we saw a lot of this the last week, but what do you think about the fact that Brown? I guess I mean you never know with this IR now whether it means they're out for a few weeks or they're out for 6-7 weeks, something like that. How much of a difference does he make in the passing game, adding in addition to Beasley and Diggs?
I mean, it's a big deal that he's not there. I know I said that Diggs and Beasley are probably the most irreplaceable receivers, but that's not a discredit to John Brown, because he is a guy who, if defenses shade coverage over to Stephon Diggs, he is capable of eating them up. He is capable for a 7-8 catch, 80-90 yard performance. And they love him in the screen game as well. You saw him burn Seattle with it. Probably should have scored on that play, but when teams start to bring pressure, he's a guy, we'll just give it to you at the line of scrimmage and let you take off. You run a 4-3 or 4-4, go do that up the field. They don't really have that right now. They don't run a whole bunch of screen passes to Stephon Diggs. They might with Beasley, but Beasley is more of a guy, a chain mover when they can't get the run game going, especially against zone coverage. He's a guy who can find the holes and pick up 6-7 yards at a pop. But it really depends on how much Gabriel Davis has developed over the course of the season. They trust him a lot, and they've trusted him since day one. They put him at every single position, but he is still just a rookie. We heard from him after this last game, and when he said that thinks that, he was kind of forcing the issue. He was pressing a bit early in the season, just like any rookie would. But now we're in week 13. He says that the game is slowing down a lot for him. And that's something that I think if you're a Bills coach or Bills fan, that's something that you really want to hear. And that might ease the blow of John Brown's absence. And this has kind of long-term impact as well, because John Brown still has another year left on his contract. But if Gabriel Davis shows out and he puts up good numbers without Brown here, they can save, I think it's $7 or $8 million by letting him go this coming offseason. Not saying that's what they're going to do, but with the salary cap expecting to take a drastic decline, it's on the board if Davis, if Davis proves he's ready for that kind of role.
Yeah, yeah, and Josh Allen is hitting his window for the fact that he can be extended next season. So that's not going to come cheap. And they got Brown on a decent deal though, because of the fact that he had some injury concerns in the past, and he had, I guess, was he? I think, did he have a sickle cell issue? Was that him or was that someone else? I can't. Yeah, he did. So yeah, so I know he had that before. So. So yeah, it might be a little more difficult to extend him than it was before. All right, I want to talk coaching, because this is the one part that's a big mystery to those of us who only like to watch the dots and not the football game and aren't there on the ground to see this. So McDermott is a guy where he came in. He kind of turned that team into a playoff team, despite the fact that they didn't have the high level. Elite quarterback play. They had competent quarterback play, but they didn't have the high level quarterback play there. He, like I said, there's some buzz around Coach of the Year, although I think he's fallen off a bit as their record has fallen off a bit there. I mean, what can you say about him as a coach, or what can you see about him as a coach? Because I know he has the defensive background, but then, like I said, they also have Leslie Frazier there, who's very strong in that area. So how do you see his influence on the team? Because it's always very difficult for us to figure out what a coach is really doing, other than pointing at a team's record and saying, well, this should be an 8-8 team, and they're an 11-5 team, so therefore the coach is good.
I think the smartest thing he probably did was surround himself, as a first-year coach, was surround himself with people who have been in the NFL for a long time as well. And he's no stranger to the league. He's been around since, I think, 1999 under Andy Reid in Philadelphia, but immediately brings on a former head coach in Leslie Frazier. Immediately the next year brings in Brian Dable, a guy who's worked with Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, been around the league for 20 plus years. So he surrounded himself with guys who knew what they were doing and who had been there before, to the point where he didn't have to try to micromanage and put too much pressure on himself. But beyond the X's and O's, I think that he really embodies the vibe that Buffalo is going for, and the culture that Buffalo is going for, of cast off, hardworking. I don't want to say blue collar, because Paul Lucas is going to find it and yell at me on Twitter, but you know what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
But he's a guy, he can inspire the best. He brings the best out of the players he brings in, because if you look at Buffalo's roster and some of the more important players on it, like Jordan Poyer, like Micah Hyde, I mean, Cole Beasley, John Brown, John Feliciano, you go up and down the board, the guys who weren't, first round picks. these are guys who were either cast off or who were, pushed aside in the draft, who were undervalued, underappreciated. And he said, look, we're all like that here. This is the island of misfit toys, but like, let's go ball out. Let's go prove them wrong. And I think that's really been powering the Bills over the past 2 or 3 seasons. So that's something. He is a great motivator. So obviously he is a good coach. He gets the most, he and his staff get the most out of, a collection of players that on paper, if you've never seen them play and you'd only heard the name, you probably aren't taking a second look at. But on the field, it's greater than the sum of their parts, if you will.
Yeah, and then specifically looking at Dable and the offense, I mean, I think he had a decent amount of hype last season. I think he may have interviewed with the Browns for a coaching job, but he's one of these guys. He's been around for a while, right? Too, and I would say he and Greg Roman were 2 guys that people were talking about with some buzz last year, but they didn't really fit into the head coach archetype, as far as that you kind of have these like very young guys who are ascending type of thing. He's maintained it this season, I would say. Obviously, Roman, there's some issues there. What's going on there? He's kind of maintained it this year. Do you think he is a strong head coaching candidate? Because again, there's a difference between being a great head coach and being a great schematic offensive coordinator. I know people kind of put those 2 things together a little bit too often. There's a lot that goes into the management and those sorts of things. So what do you see from him as far as the temperament and the ability for potentially being a head coach in the future?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily. I love me some Dabes, man. That's he's one of my favorite coaches I've ever worked with. I didn't, just based on how Buffalo's offense looked last year. I mean, it was an improvement from 2018, but I didn't necessarily think he was more of a head coaching candidate than Leslie Frazier, somebody who had coached a top 3 unit in consecutive seasons. And the fact that Frazier isn't getting interviews was something.
Well, everyone's obsessed with offense, right? Everyone thinks you bring this guy in and then your offense is fixed or somehow. That's that sort of situation.
The Sean McVay effect, man. It's still rampant. But that's something I spoke with Leslie about, and it didn't make much sense to either of us. But you're absolutely right. Brian Dable has not just maintained his head coaching candidacy, he's elevated it in 2020. And you got to remember, his previous stops, and you look at what he's done with the Browns and the Chiefs and the Dolphins, and nothing really stands out on paper except for somehow turning Peyton Hillis into a Madden cover athlete. But when you look at the Bills roster right now, this is the best collection of talent he's ever had, and it's not close. I mean, he goes from your best weapons on offense are Reggie Bush and I think it's Mike Thomas, was the running back from Ohio State or from Kansas State. When it goes from those being your best weapons to Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and John Brown, and he's flexing it right now. He's shown an ability to extract the most out of his players. He's shown a willingness to get creative. You see all the motion, the trick plays. He's not afraid to let a wide receiver throw a pass to an offensive lineman or throw a fade to his quarterback. I think that kind of creativity is going to be attractive this offseason when teams start looking for coaches. It's just a matter of, does he want to leave? As far as his temperament, though, I think he'd be a great head coach. Teams, players love Brian Dable. He connects with his players well, FaceTimes with them all the time. I think that's his preferred method of communication, actually. If he's not in person, he'll FaceTime you instead of calling or texting. They enjoy that. With the media, he is exactly what you would think somebody who worked with Bill Belichick and Nick Saban would sound like. So he's got that crossed off already. I think he'd be a good head coach. I think he'd be a good head coach. It's just a matter of, does he want to be? I think it's kind of a weird phenomenon here where we attach goals to coaches. Like we as media, as the football world, say like, he's going to be a great head coach one day. We don't know if they even want to be a head coach. Like, you don't have to be a head coach in order to be a successful coach in this industry, in this game. So it's just a matter of, does he want to leave? But I think the opportunities are going to be there for him.
Yeah, I mean, well, like I said, I think he did interview with the Browns, so he's at least put himself out there a little bit here. Now, okay, so the relationship with coaching and front office, I think, is interesting. I don't know if you read this Tyler Dunn article about the Bills, specifically the Patrick Mahomes thing, like that.
Amazing story.
The owner's name escapes me right now. What's the owner's name?
Terry Terry Pagula.
Yeah. So he, you never know with these things. Like it's like how every team, all 31 teams wanted to draft Russell Wilson, but they didn't for some reason. So you never know, like after the fact. But they specifically had the pick, right? So they had the pick that they traded out. According to the article, it was like McDermott was. I don't. He was not quoted in there, but he was kind of say to someone who may not have wanted to make the pick. Ownership did. It sounded like McDermott had a lot of pull. How much pull do you think he still has on that side of things? Because he's there first. It seems like a lot of teams are going to this coach. Coach is almost king model over everything there. So, how do you see that working relationship between the two of them?
Yeah, in 2017, it was Sean McDermott pulling strings. Like that's
Okay.
it's the worst kept secret in Buffalo. That
Yeah.
the joke is that Whaley had had like a toy phone during the draft, but it was Sean
Yeah.
McDermott making the calls. No offense to these guys, obviously, but
Yeah.
from my understanding and from what I am told, there is a definitive, I don't want to say split, but difference in responsibilities when it comes to roster assembly and roster coaching. Sean McDermott and his staff handle the coaching. Brandon Beane in the front office handle the roster decisions. I think that, obviously he's not going to make decisions without at least talking to Sean McDermott, but it is Brandon Beane's call on any trade, any signing, any release, any draft. That's all him. And but I do think they have a good working relationship because obviously, I mean, look what they've been able to do in a short amount of time. And we're talking about a complete roster overhaul from, I think the only players from before 2017 are the long snapper, Reed Ferguson, and Jerry Hughes. Everybody else has been completely shuffled out and made into the McBean, as they call it, image. But it is Brandon Beane. He does deserve the credit for the assembly of the roster, for putting these players in place, and McDermott gets the credit for coaching it into a winner.
Okay, so I want to hit some big topic questions here, and I think this is probably what everyone is wondering about the Bills right now. I mean, again, lay of the land here. 8-3, look like they're in the driver's seat to win the division. If they win out the next few games, I think the Dolphins are a game back, but the Dolphins have a worse divisional record, so they have a tiebreaker there too. Even if they lose to the Dolphins later this year, they kind of really have that inside track to win the division. Now, you're not going to have a bye in a difficult AFC with the Chiefs and the Steelers there reigning on top. So, in your opinion, are the Bills a contender, not necessarily to win the Super Bowl, are they a contender to make it through the AFC this year?
I think so. That game against the Titans, that Tuesday Night Football notwithstanding, I think they are at the very least competitive with the best teams in the AFC. When the Steelers come to town next week, I think it's going to be a real benchmark for them. It's going to really say a lot about their ceiling, the Bills' ceiling. But they were in the game against Kansas City, and they played a pretty poor game. You mentioned it earlier that Titans game was kind of the beginning of Josh Allen's return to earth. I don't think he played that poorly against the Titans. He played poorly against the Chiefs, though. Like that was his worst game of the season, and they still only lost by, I think it was 9. They had a chance to tie it up there at the end of the game. But I like the coaching staff. I think that it's a good enough staff that they can scheme around any opponent, and they really excel, particularly McDermott and Frazier, at taking away what opponents do best. And they've been limiting these elite quarterbacks over the past few weeks. Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert. Look at the numbers themselves and you think, wow, these guys they had their normal output. You watch the film, these guys struggled for a majority of the game. And I think that's worth noting considering they're all top 5 offenses. But we'll see if they play to their ceiling, if they play best Bills football. So first half of the Rams game, 3/4 of the Seahawks game, that level of Buffalo Bills football is tough, if not impossible to beat. I think they're right up there with anybody in the league. The difference is, the problem is, I guess, they haven't been that consistently good. They haven't had that output consistently over the course of a full game yet. So if they can put that together come playoff time, then yeah, they're a threat to go all the way, they're a threat to win it all. I mean, they've already beat what might be the best team in the NFC in Seattle, even if Chris Carson wasn't playing. I think they match up well enough with Green Bay as well, or New Orleans. Not willing to put Tampa Bay up there; they get pounded on national TV too much. But but I think that Buffalo's got a shot. It's just a matter of, can they be that consistent team over the course of 4 quarters, and we haven't seen that up to now.
Yeah, I mean, the AFC is just rough. I mean, we think about how difficult it's going to be to get out of there. I mean, I remember beginning of the season when the Bills started very strong, it was Kansas City's number 1. Ravens were kind of locked into people's perception of who the second team was, and it was, who's the third best team? Is it the Bills? Is it the Steelers? Is it the Titans? Now we have the Steelers looking like that they could get a bye there, and now we have the Titans who, had a little bit of a lull, but they've been coming back there. So it's strange because this Bills team is really, really good. I mean, they could be almost arguably the best team in the NFC if you wanted to put them up against some of those guys, and they may be 5th here in the AFC. Where do you see them specifically against the Ravens and the Titans? Because those are the Ravens and the Titans, because those are the 2 teams that I'm not really sure about at this point, how to even think about them versus someone like the Bills.
Well, the Ravens, they've kind of come crashing back down to earth in 2020 compared to their lofty standards from last year. But I want to go back to last year, because that game against the Bills late in the season laid the blueprint for how to defend them. Yeah, and the Titans came out and actually said, we watched their tape against the Bills and realized, okay, this is how you can slow them down, and ended up beating them pretty handily come playoff time. And that was a 1-score game. That came down to the final drive. Bills lost, obviously, but with that offense the Bills had last season, for them to be within 1 score of that Ravens team was eye-opening. Like, that was probably the most impressive loss of the season for Buffalo. You'd like to think that with an improved offense and with a defense that's capable of playing to that standard, they should be able to beat Baltimore this year. Titans, I don't think the Titans are, 38 or however much, 28 points better than Buffalo.
Yeah.
I think things kind of spiraled out of hand there.
Yeah.
But they play again. It's not going to be 43-16, which just even saying it out loud is like, man, I cannot believe I'm watching them get pounded like this. That doesn't usually happen with the Bills, over the past couple seasons. But I think they still match up well enough with Tennessee. That was a matter of, they just couldn't stop turning the ball over. And, it depends on where the game is played as well. I think there's a little, even without fans, I think there's kind of an aura of playing in your home stadium, even come playoff time. So, we'll see where that game is. But it's hard to beat the same team twice. It's hard to blow out the same team twice. So, I'm not ready to say, definitively they would go out and beat the Titans. But I think it would be a lot more competitive game than we saw in Week 5.
Yeah. I mean, the defense struggled, obviously, mightily in that game, and that's the question, I think, for them. What do you think about this defense? Because I mentioned last week, the last couple of weeks has been looking a little bit more like 2019. I mean, we have them struggling from most of our grades, especially in coverage versus last year. But you had some interesting numbers that you were putting out there, where in yards per game, they're not necessarily looking that hot the last few weeks. But they're doing the other things. They're getting pressure. They're turning the ball over. And I mean, they're not super reliant upon turnovers, but they're starting to get some. Where if you're not getting some, that makes a big difference. So what do you think? That may be the key. Can this defense return to adjacent to what we saw the last couple of years? And that would be the thing that could really propel them far into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's 10 or 12 turnovers, 10 turnovers in the last 3 games. That's been critical. And like you said, the pressure, their sack rate is in the top 10. And it's kind of been like that for over the course of the season. Like, their problem was never getting to the quarterback. The issues I highlighted a few weeks back was, they were allowing the most wide open receivers in the league, or they're allowing wide open receivers at one of the highest rates in the league, and quarterbacks were getting the ball out at a faster rate than all but, I think, 2 teams in the NFL. It was more of a coverage issue than it was a defensive line or a pass rush issue. But that coverage is starting to tighten up a bit. Tre'Davious White is becoming that ball hawk again. He's flashing that ball hawk ability. Saw him break off of his cover three responsibilities to bait Justin Herbert last game. That's about as pretty a pick as you're going to see. They're healthy. They're getting healthy at that second cornerback position. Levi Wallace, I mean, they keep bringing players to replace him, but the fact is Levi Wallace is the second best cornerback they have, bar none. So him being healthy helps a lot. AJ Klein and Tremaine Edmonds, you know, they spend a lot of time, I think, struggling to get used to one another. You know, as much as we talk about how weird 2020 has been, we always seem to forget that there was no real off season. So they're still getting used to playing alongside each other in a game setting and saying, okay, this is his weakness. This is what he's best at. This is, you know, his tendencies where I need to compensate. I think they're starting to click in that aspect, and they possibly get Matt Milano back. He's one of the better coverage linebackers in the league when he's healthy. He just hasn't been healthy. So I think they're starting to round back into form now. They're starting to force turnovers again. They've been excellent on third down this past 3-4 games. That's been critical. And you can't look at the yards, because yards per game, like we said, 31st in the league over the last 3 games. But they've also played 3 top 5 offenses in the NFL and pushed 2 of them to garbage time yards. You know, the Chargers and the Seahawks picked up a ton of yards late in the third and the fourth quarters. That's going to skew the numbers a bit. But I thought it was telling is Leslie Frazier. He is one of the most calm and reserved and I don't want to say professional. Obviously, he's professional, but he's not a big rah guy on these press conferences. He's definitely not the type to beat his chest. He came out yesterday's press conference, and the first thing he said, unprompted, was, "That's the defense that we're used to." It was basically, the translation was, "Put respect on our name immediately. Like, we're back." And I think that going forward, that's so important, because this is such a critical 5-game stretch to end the season. I think San Francisco is better than they look on paper. They're well coached enough that they can win any game. Pittsburgh is obviously Pittsburgh. New England's showing some signs of life. They still got Miami there at the end of the season. They need this defense to click like they were in 2018 and 19 if they want any shot at making a title run.
Yeah. I mean, I know everything works together, but I would say this defense, I mean, there's been a discussion, I think we've contributed to this a lot, about whether teams build, back to front when they're talking about the defense. The Bills defense in particular, when you have Tre'Davious White, when you have one of the stronger safety combinations of Poyer and Hyde, when you have linebackers who I don't know if guys like Tremaine Edmonds have graded well for us in coverage, but they're fast, right? That they theoretically they should be able to stick with guys. And Milano, they should be able to stick with guys. So do you think this is a back to front defense, but yet their biggest investment has been in the draft in someone like Ed Oliver? And can they pick it up on the front end, I guess, a little bit too, even if that back end starts to play like we think they should play? I'm confident the back end can round into form. I'm not sure if I know what we have as far as the line and the ability to generate pressure if they need to with 4.
Yeah, with Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison, plus Ed Oliver's first round salary, this is the most expensive defensive line in the league. And they're not putting up the kind of flashy sack numbers that you would expect, but they are creating, like we said, enough pressure to kind of warrant that price tag. I think where beyond the health issues that they've had this year, a lot of their problems stem from Star Lodulele opting out, the one-tech defensive tackle. He's kind of been like a scapegoat out here, but the fact is he's so big and he takes up so much space. He attracts attention of an offensive line, and he opens up lanes for guys like Ed Oliver, for guys like Jerry Hughes. And without him there, I think Ed Oliver had to play a lot more one tech than he was used to, or than he's accustomed to. And playing out of position, that's not what they drafted him to do. And he struggled a bit. Getting back to that 3 technique, you're starting to see him become a lot more disruptive, especially last game. Got a little unhinged there toward the end.
Some penalty issues there.
Yeah. That the back-to-back, the personal foul and the encroachment or the neutral zone, same thing. But that is those are the kind of head scratching, mental mistakes that you would like him to eliminate. But you cannot deny that the guy makes an impact when he's on. So he hasn't been putting up the sack numbers, and some people think he's maybe like an Aaron Donald type. Definitely not
Yeah.
putting up those numbers, but he is making an impact on the game. Um, but they really do stress rush plus coverage, and that's what's made them so successful. Is if that pass rush can make a quarterback or force a quarterback into a decision faster than he's used to or before he's comfortable doing so, this is a good enough secondary to make them pay. Like everybody on there, everybody in the secondary is a ball hawk. White, Hyde, Poyer, all of them are capable of making plays on the ball, and they're smart enough to bait quarterbacks into doing so. So it's less of a front to back or back to front as it is. They really do need to work in synergy, and as much as coach speaky as that sounds, like it's critical because if one facet is not up to par, like the secondary wasn't in the beginning of the season, then the whole thing kind of falls apart.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate in some ways for Ed Oliver that he does Aaron Donald thing. Because I mean, you never want that, right? You never want to be
No.
compared to him. But I remember on draft night, I can't read. Well, actually, I might have the ordering wrong. I think it might have been when the Lions took T.J. Hawkinson that Bean was like so excited. They had this behind that he was ridiculously pumped to get Ed Oliver there. So I think he still has a lot of potential going forward. And yeah, if the back everything comes together, they're gonna have a chance going forward here. So okay, another question here on the AFC East, because I heard a pretty provocative take by on the Athletic podcast with Mays and Tyson. They were both, this is removed by a week, but they were both thinking that the Dolphins may be in a better position going forward because of the draft picks, because of the salary cap, because of the fact that the Bills are going to have to re-up a bunch of guys going forward. As far as in that AFC East, who do you think is going to be the best team or is going to have the chance to win the most division titles in the AFC East over the next, let's say, 5 to 7 years? Do you think the Bills and the Dolphins are equals there, or are you leaning on one of those teams?
It is a great question. And Bills fans are going to hammer me for hesitating there. But the fact is, the strength of the Dolphins campaign here is all the draft picks that they have. And
Right.
they do have a decent history, a decent recent history of hitting in the draft. But until I see those picks, it's fairy dust. It's fugazi. Like I don't, like Matt
Right.
McConaughey in Wolf of Wall Street. Like I don't believe it. It doesn't exist. So right now, what the Bills have, their foundation exists. Tre'Davious White is locked up for the next 5 seasons. Deion Dawkins is
not that
locked
expensive
up
of
for
a
the next
contract
season.
either. I mean, the White contract is not. I was surprised actually that it wasn't, that it didn't seem to be. I mean, especially when you have Jalen Ramsey and other guys coming out after that.
Yeah, I thought that, I kind of felt like he was going to wait, or I thought he was going to wait, but creating generational wealth for his family and changing the course of his family's fortune, I know was extremely important to him. I understand, it's still a lot of money. I think what 17 and a half a year, it's still $70 million. The guy has changed his family's future. Like, I understand why he took it. I thought he was going to flirt with that $20 million range, and he kind of did. But either way, he's locked up for the next 5 years.
Right.
Left tackle Deion Dawkins, he's locked up for the next 4 years. You've got 5th-year options on Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds. You got to re-sign Matt Milano here. Micah Hyde's got 2 more years left. Jordan Poyer is in for the next 3. Stephon Diggs, you've got him for 5 years. That's what, especially, when we're talking about, the price that you pay for him, would you rather have, as good as Justin Jefferson's been, would you really rather have Justin Jefferson for the next 4 years or Stephon Diggs for the next 5 years on a team-friendly deal? Like I think it's a no-brainer there. So they've got a foundation here. They've got stars already in place. When you look at the Dolphins roster, they spent a lot this season this offseason kind of revamping that team's image, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, adding Byron Jones, adding Shaq Lawson, adding Kyle Van Noy. Like, they've got pieces, they've got dudes. We still don't know what Tua Tagovailoa is, though. Like, he's got a 3-game sample size, one of which he was yanked from. People are going to cry injury. I don't know if it was injury.
He wasn't
related.
great. Injured or not, he wasn't playing well. Yeah.
He was not. He's holding on the ball for too long, and he was getting himself injured. So, I mean, if he's getting pulled, it's kind of for his own safety at some point. But either way, I'll take what I can see rather than what I can't see. And right now, I see the foundation. I see the future of the Bills right now, and I'm going with that to kind of run the AFC East over the next several years over what the Dolphins could be. Now, if the Dolphins smack on all of their draft picks, then it's going to be a really tight race to come. Like, it could be the next Seahawks Niners during the early 2010s. If both teams pan out, like this will be an exciting race to watch year in and year out. But right now, yeah, it looks like the Bills are better built for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's some argument that the Dolphins could have a higher ceiling, like if you hit on all these other things, but the Bills already have these hits. They already accumulated some hits. So yeah, it's gonna be a little more difficult to fit them under the cap, but you probably rather be in that situation going forward. So, lastly, looking at Allen versus these other young quarterbacks, I mean, we're having kind of a renaissance here with a lot of great young quarterbacks. I can't decide which direction I want to go. If I want to go for like obviously guys he's better than to start off with, or guys that he's probably not going to be compared to going forward. But I'm looking at all these young guys, so I'm going to start by saying I'm just going to go through them, and you tell me whether you think you'd rather have Allen, let's say, for the next 10 years than than quarterback X, whoever I name. Okay. I'm going to start. Well, I'll start with an easy one. So, Baker Mayfield. I assume you're taking Josh Allen over Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
I don't know why I
yeah,
could
that
ask
one
that.
is
Although it's kind of weird because like during the off season, it probably was like who knows, right? And that's probably flipped more than anything. Okay, so let's stick with 2018 here. Now, again, another thing that I would not even have thought about asking in the offseason, I'm going to ask now, is Lamar Jackson. Would you rather have Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen?
that's tough. That's really tough. And
Yeah, this is the toughest one, I would say.
You spent like there was a point last year, I'll admit it, and I'm not going to out them because I don't want them to deal with the storm that I might get for this. But there was a point where another prominent Bills reporter and I spoke at practice and said, wow, where would this team be if Lamar Jackson was quarterback this year in 2019? I think it's a fair question. They had an opportunity to draft him. He had an MVP caliber season, and it was a top 3 defense. You have to at least wonder how far that team could have gone. But I can't help but to think that I think Lamar Jackson is closer to his ceiling than Josh Allen is right now. And they're really comparable the way that they can take over a game. Josh Allen with his arm, Lamar with his legs, but that's tough. I think for this offense, and if we're saying we're putting both players in Buffalo, I think I would take Josh Allen. Because he can put up. It might not be the flashy rushing numbers, but he can put up numbers on the ground. He can score on the ground. He's a threat in the red zone. I mean, you look at his numbers. God, if I jinx it, they're going to kill my mentions. But he's got like 51 touchdowns and no interceptions in the red zone because it's impossible to defend that guy. So I would take Josh Allen.
Yeah, I think it's crazy it sounds because I was one of these guys predicting that Lamar was gonna like not make a leap. I mean, he was a unanimous MVP. So what sort of leap could he make? But I was thinking more in people's minds that he could take a leap this season. But I've really been disappointed there. We'll see what happens, but I think I'm with you. Although, like I said, if we use any of this on social media, I'm just going to clip you in there for saying Josh Allen. I'll leave my part out. I
think I've built up. I hope at least I've built up enough good equity in Buffalo that they give me the benefit of the doubt here. But yeah, I just with his arm, I haven't seen it from Lamar Jackson against prominent opponents. We saw him tear apart the Dolphins last year, but can he do that against the Steelers? Can he do that against the Chiefs? And can he do that in prime time? And I don't know. We're not seeing the up and to the right this year. We're kind of seeing a stagnant Lamar Jackson, which normally, if you stagnate after an MVP season, it sounds kind of like a weird critique. But I don't know. Josh Allen at his best is he is a top tier player in this league, and it's hard to pick guys over him.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, okay, so I assume the young guys, the rookies, Herbert or Burrow. I mean, you probably lean Allen just because you kind of know what you have there a little bit more for those guys. So the one other guy that I could think of who's probably close, because I don't think we're not getting into like Deshaun Watson territory. We're not gonna have that discussion because I don't think there's a point. It's kind of I don't want to insult any Deshaun Watson by saying that there. Kyler Murray, anything? Any Kyler Murray?
That one is tough. I've got this theory, and kind of, I've checked it against a few people around the league that in your first 2 years as a player, two things are going to happen. You figure the league out and the league figures you out. The order varies, but Kyler was so good as a rookie that you can't help but think, okay, the league is going to figure him out in 2020, but he's still churning. He's still going, and he's still playing well, especially in that offense. It's difficult it's hard to take Josh Allen over him. I like Josh Allen's durability. I like his size, but Kyler's speed, and he's got some Russell Wilson in him, a lot of Russell Wilson in him, in the sense that he avoids contact very well, and he protects himself very well. So you can think that, okay, while he's scampering around like Stewie from Family Guy, he's not going to get one of those bone-crushing, career-threatening hits. And so that one's tough. I think that one's a push there. Because
I think a push is fair. Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen that much from Murray. I mean, the one downside I say for Murray is I don't think he's put it all together passing the ball yet. I mean, his rushing is off the charts this year, and I think he's been good passing the ball. He shows that ability, but I think we've seen a little bit of that the last couple of weeks when he's had this shoulder issue and he's not running the ball, that offense was maybe a little bit more reliant on him just doing things that are just kind of crazy, like just being the inability for anyone to even touch him when he's running 30 yards downfield. So I like to see him do that. Yeah, it's amazing. You think you can't do that at the NFL level, right? Because he used to do that in college, where he'd run around someone, like the person went on you. You're like, you can't do that in the NFL, kid. And then he's actually doing that in the NFL. It's amazing.
Like, my bad, you can do that in the NFL. I was wrong. Yeah. Sorry, officer, I didn't know you could do that. No, they both have their flaws, because they both have their pros and cons. I like Josh Allen's size. Like I said, I like the fact that I don't really have to worry about him when he's running the ball. If somebody wants to try to hit them, he's basically as big as anybody on the defensive side of the ball. The only concern is, can he cover the ball up, and can he stop lower? Can he, learn when to say die? That was his big issue when he got knocked out of the game against the Patriots last year. Was, it was an illegal hit, but it also was a case of he didn't really say die, and he was trying to fight for yards. It's just who he is.
I mean, it almost happened last week, right?
That one, there were a few circumstances where, like, he's being wrapped up. He's hard to bring down, but he's being wrapped up and trying to either find somebody or get that ball off, and he got twisted up. And that was, that was a moment that no Bills fan, no football fan wants to see. But with Kyler, I see a lot. I don't see as many of the what was that throws. You know what I mean? Like, Josh Allen, he's got an incredible arm, and he hits some windows that three guys in the league, maybe three guys in the league can hit. But then there's also some throws where it's like, yo, that's triple coverage, and one of those guys is Patrick Peterson. What was that? And you don't see that as much from Kyler Murray. And so, like I said, there's pros and cons to both. I think the push is the fair thing.
Yeah, I think Kyler's a little bit more conservative with some of that there. So actually, another name, this last name I want to hit before we wrap up. I appreciate all the time here. And I didn't really even think about this before, but he's not on a second contract yet. It's just being extended forever. But Dak Prescott, I think, is another name where he kind of falls into that range to make interesting. What do you think about Dak Prescott versus Josh Allen?
That's a
Sorry,
good
I'm giving
one.
you all these hard ones.
that one's, oh boy, that one's tough.
I mean, if you want to pin it on the injury, you can do that too. You could take that route. I'll give that to you.
Like, it is the one we did get to see them head to head, and this was mediocre. Mediocre, but this was last year's Josh Allen, and he outdueled Dak in his backyard on Jerry's day. So I'm inclined to take Josh Allen over him, but Dak Prescott is nothing to sleep on, and I think actually. I think I'd have to go Dak just because of the body of work he's put together. And he's done it for more than one season. Josh Allen is having an incredible season. And if this is the level of play that he sustains for the remainder of his career, then he is going to have an awesome NFL career. But we have seen quarterbacks in year 3 thrive and then falter. I'm looking straight at Mitch Trubisky right now. He had a good third season, and I believe he was the betting favorite in Vegas for MVP. And now he is battling out with Nick Foles, getting beat 41 to whatever on Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football. Like he's struggling to keep his job. Then they didn't pick up the 5th-year option, I believe, right?
Yeah. Well, it's guaranteed now. So yeah, they couldn't. It used to just be an injury guarantee. Now it's a full guarantee. So yeah, they passed on that.
Exactly. So I mean, we've seen it before. I need to see it again. I need to see him do this in 2021. But because of the body of work, I would take I'd take Dak Prescott.
Yeah, it's weird because at first I was thinking the injury might be the downside for Dak, but if anyone could look better in some ways from having the injury, it's the fact that how bad that team has looked with a supposedly one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL playing in there. So Dak's reputation, I mean, it may have been bolstered actually a little bit from the fact that he's gone down after he talk about someone who was carrying a team the first few weeks.
Exactly. It's kind of like that argument back in, what year was it, man? 2012? What was the year that the Colts ended up with the number 1 pick? And when Peyton Manning
I think it might have been. It was either 2011 or I think it might have been 2011. I don't remember what it is.
I think it was a 2011 season because they got Luck in the 2012 draft.
Right, 2012 draft was Wilson,
Cam.
Luck, and RG3. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like the 2011 argument that Peyton Manning should arguably be the MVP because he's proven to be the most valuable player, even with his absence. The Colts are bad, so it looks kind of like that. It was like a really long way to get to my point, but you know what I'm trying to say here.
Oh yeah. I mean, we talk about that a lot with the MVP talk. Like this kind of like that. That's one of the Wilson versus Mahomes things. It's like, what would the Seahawks look without Wilson versus what would the Chiefs look like without Mahomes? And I think there's a point there, but you can't.
But I guess what would any team?
Patrick's gone next level now. Yeah.
What would any team look like? Without their starting quarterback. It's it's like what. Not to keep up with the Peyton Manning references, but that old story I think Gruden tells that, he asked Tom Moore why the Colts backup wasn't getting any reps. And he's like, if 18 goes down, we're bleeped and we don't practice bleeped. So you can make that argument for probably, 28 quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah. And hopefully, nothing personally against Matt Barkley. Hopefully we don't see him more than a couple of kneel downs or something in the future if he happens to play. Well, Marcel, thank you so much for joining me, answering all the questions. It's on Twitter at Marcel_LJ, right?
Correct.
And anything else you want to plug before going? Otherwise, everyone follow Marcel, read his stuff on ESPN. It's great stuff.
No, man, nothing to plug right now. Appreciate your time, man. This was a good time. Hopefully, this is like an olive branch between the Buffalo community and PFF. As like I mean, they made sweatshirts, man. Like that's
I'm just glad we could just use the numbers to flip. We could just flip any direction just to tell us. So now the numbers are good. So we love Josh Allen. No attachment,
right.
no personal attachment. So again, thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for listening. Rate, review the pod, and I'll be coming at you again next week.
You want to get rid of me and get back to more great PFF YouTube content? All you have to do is push that button right there and subscribe. Thanks for watching.